Everyone, it's Daniel Elwood, and Barbara Paul Johnson is my co-host with the most, and he is back this week after taking a mountain biking excursion last week and inadvertently missing the show. Probably best for everyone involved. This is going to be episode, 187? And we do have a fan of Tupac featured in this film, so quite appropriate that it's lastnight.com/187 for Hunt for the Wilderpeople. And we're going to have our buddy Pat MacFarlane of Liberty Weekly joining us. Now, Pat has been on the show countless times, most recently for The Matrix Reloaded. But we will have a full catalog of his previous appearances on our show notes page here. And let's bring him on now. He's on main screen. And Pat, welcome back to the show. Why don't you just remind people where they can find your work? And I know you're working on a couple of other different projects. You got some cool stuff going on over there. Give us the rundown.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm glad to be back. Always fun to do actual anarchy or the Last Nighters with you guys. My name is Patrick MacFarlane. I'm a practicing attorney. I do libertarian legal theory and other topics at libertyweekly.net. I also work and appear at the Libertarian Institute, libertarianinstitute.org/Patrick. And I'm glad to say that my writing has appeared on antiwar.com. So check that out. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, there you go. Getting the big boy pants on and doing all the big boy stuff. We are very much in awe of what you've been able to accomplish. And I do appreciate the amount of work and effort you put into your show. I highly recommend your show and the Libertarian Institute, as well as antiwar.com. And we'll have links to all of that stuff on our show notes page at lastnighters.com/187, of course. And now, without too much further ado, we can get into the old Google description. And I'll pull that up now. Of course, we're going to be talking about, I'm not sure how to say his name, Taika Waititi. He is a New Zealand actor/director who is pretty quirky and does some pretty interesting work. Of course, most recent film was the JoJo film. What was the name of that one?
JoJo Rabbit.
JoJo Rabbit. That's right. The one with Titi actually playing a version of Hitler, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, let's get into this. Hunt for the Wilderpeople came out in 2016. It has a 7.9 out of 10 on IMDb, 97% Rotten Tomatoes, 81% Metacritic, and 93% of Google users like it. The description reads: a boy, Julian Dennison, and his foster father, Sam Neill, become the subjects of a manhunt after they get stranded in the New Zealand wilderness. Release date June 24, 2016. Directed by Taika Waititi with a budget of $2.5 million. And Robert, let's go to you for your opening salvo and bonus question. What was the reason you suggested this film?
Isn't it blatantly obvious, Daniel? This movie has a libertarian streak in it a mile wide, and much like Ricky Baker, the libertarian life was not chosen by me, it chose me. It's a movie about a rebellious kid who has fallen through the cracks of this government system of helping out kids. And he finds actual family that want to care for him. But then his aunt, who is hilarious, dies of like a heart attack or something. And then the government comes in and says, okay, now that there's not a woman around the house, now it's not a home fit for a kid anymore. And now we have better places for this kid to live because we think so. And therefore we deem it so. And the kid's like, no gracias. I have agency. I am declaring myself, sovereign. And I'm going to go off and live by myself. And he, bless him, he tries to do it. And it just so happens that his uncle, is like this very knowledgeable bushman. And they go on the run. And it's
Bushman.
Yes, that's right. And it's this kid, it's a fish out of water story, because it's this very much kind of urban youth kid thrown into this bush environment. And he's also dealing with his kind of yokel redneck kind of family. They're not really redneck yokels, but they're more rural people anyway, that know how to like hunt and skin animals and this kind of things. And so you get a little bit of that clash, but you get the real clash between the government chasing him down and these people who are just like, leave us alone. And me, how could you watch this movie and not identify with people going, no, I know better about my own life than you do, Mr. Government Overlord people. And it doesn't hurt that, it's a comedy. It's actually a funny movie. The child CPS people are incompetent, so that kind of makes it more funny for me. It's just a beautiful, funny, freedom-oriented spirit of a buddy movie, and it's also an adventure movie, and it's also wacky and silly, like Taika Waititi. If you like Taika Waititi's humor, I think you're going to enjoy this a lot. This is one of the films that he made that really got the attention of Hollywood, where he came over and then he did the Thor and he did What We Do in the Shadows and that kind of stuff. But before that, he was doing these fun New Zealand little quirky comedy movies, and this is one of them, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I heard he was making commercials prior to this, and that's where he found the Ricky Baker actor, Julian, in doing one of his commercials.
Nice. Yeah, I think he did. I don't think the acting is like Oscar worthy or anything like that. I think it's more, comedy level acting, but it's pretty good. And Ricky Baker is a fun character that I certainly enjoyed his adventures.
Right. Yeah. And Waititi's directing style and cinematography that's employed, you see this in JoJo as well. It's got a lot of like quirky little things into it. The transitions are really interesting. I like the panning and then the characters coming in and out, doing like an elapsed time kind of thing, almost like the montage style, but a bit of a unique twist on it, pun intended. And you see that kind of work in his films, and I think it is a bit of a signature stamp, and it's very effective. And I haven't seen it in a lot of other things, so it's like you can identify a Waititi film just from those little elements in it, and I think that's a nice thing, because there's 100+ years of filmmaking, and lots of things have been done before. So to find something that stands out and actually works really well is pretty cool. Pat, what's your take on the good description, Robert's take, and what's your feeling on Waititi's directing style?
Well, I'll start with his directing style, because I really love a lot of his works, and I didn't know that he did What We Do in the Shadows, and now that I hear that, it totally makes sense. But that's one of my favorite movies. I mean, the TV show on FX, I don't know if he's involved with that as well, but it's awesome. And the one thing that I appreciate that he does is he has these really wacky, like out of the box kind of like ultra violent scenes that, like, we had a couple in this movie, and it makes sense that they happen. But like What We Do in the Shadows, there's the part where like the vampire, he tries to be neat and orderly, but he tries to suck the blood of one of his victims, and the blood's just shooting all over the place. So things like that are really cool that he does.
Yeah, and What We Do in the Shadows is a movie that we had considered doing, and then Robert was like, no, you watch it first and then tell me if you still want to do it. And I watched it and I enjoyed it, but I was like, yeah, what would we even talk about?
Yeah. I appreciated that too. But yeah, so the TV show is great if you haven't seen it. But yeah, this is a very natural libertarian movie. One thing that I wanted to talk about, and we'll get into later, I'm sure, is this kind of like urban rural split. And now that I think you guys both kind of live in a rural area, but I recently moved from a bigger place to a very kind of rural place. And this whole idea of like where I live, there's also like this youth retreat camp where like really wealthy people in like the West and East Coast will send their kids to kind of go. Kids have like drug problems. They send them out here to get, get in touch with nature. So that was an interesting angle. I thought we could talk about later too. But yeah, it's, you got government incompetence. You have the spirit of like independence and individuality, and you have like this rugged individualism too, that I really appreciate.
Yeah, and on top of the incompetence, you also see the power trip.
The power
that
trip
they go on, and yeah, just go straight to their head. And I know it's played to comedic effect, and so it's like purposefully over the top, but it's still fun to see that and to see it being made fun of.
And it rings true, though. I mean,
yeah.
even though those kind of general workers don't necessarily take their God complexes and to the ridiculous extent that where they say ridiculously funny things, but they do make decisions where what they think is in the best interest for these people, given the resources that they have, instead of, I mean, this is a question I wanted to ask you guys. Ricky Baker is what, 14 in the movie?
I think he gets the dog for his 13th birthday.
13.
Okay.
Yeah.
13 years old. And he pretty much declares that he knows what's best. But the government comes in and says, oh, no, there's not a woman in the household anymore. So therefore now it's not okay for you to be here for some reason. Like, right? I don't know what, I guess Sam Neill is incapable of caring for the kid or whatever. But Ricky Baker's like, no. I don't want to go back to the government housing system where kids get shuffled around and no one actually listens to us and listens to the problems that we have. And one girl was getting raped by her foster father and nobody listened to her until she died, probably under mysterious circumstances. So I don't want to do that. And I like it better here. Listen to me. But since he's 13, nobody listens to him other than Sam Neill, right? He doesn't just turn the kid in. He assists him in his flight.
Well, I think that there's a period of time where Sam Neill's like, hey, they're the ones with the guns and they're the ones with the say, and we're going to do what they are saying we need to do because I'm not in a position to raise you. I didn't choose to have you. It was the wife. And it's only after they're trapped out there when he twists his ankle and has to be out in the bush for camping with him for several weeks where that bond finally develops. But prior to that, he was going to just let him take him.
Right. He's very much like, well, they can do whatever they want. They're the government. And Ricky Baker was like, no, they can't do this. And he's like, yes, they can.
Yeah. Which, I mean, sometimes, I mean, you got to pick your battles, unfortunately, so like, even though oftentimes they'll do something that is immoral or, technically legal, but per natural law would be illegal, they don't give a fuck.
Well, Daniel, let me ask you this question though. Do you think, I mean, obviously I'm on the side of Ricky Baker and Sam Neill in this movie. I mean, they're obviously the heroes, and the CPS workers or whoever they are, especially the lady, is the villain, or for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But she probably sees herself as the hero, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
She sees herself as rescuing this kid. Obviously, Sam Neill is made out to be, like a sexual molester kind of person at some point, kind of comedically.
Right. And I'm sure that they're aware of his incarceration as well.
Right. But even before that, she was intent on getting this kid and putting him in some sort of a government home. Is she way out of line here? I mean, he's a 13-year-old kid. And he has the ability to throw things and kick things and set things on fire. We know all these things are true. He's a troubled kid. What should happen to him? His actual parents are dead, right?
So, from what we are told, the mother gives him up because she was too young.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So what do you think? What do you think? I mean, how far off base is she? Given the situation she finds herself in.
Man, I really don't like these government monopolized services, because they are things that you would need absent government, and they would be better served, and there'd be other options, and you know, the market would provide. But in the scope of, you know, she's in the CPS division and she's trying to look at what's best for the child, on paper she probably is doing the right thing per her directive and per the information that she has. But, you know, Ricky has agency. Granted, he's immature. You know, he's a young kid. And then there is the God complex, and she's obviously seeing herself as a hero, but also seeing herself as the hero, therefore justifying her escalation and getting like the SWAT team involved and like trying to act like a cop and all of those things. So it clearly went to her head.
Oh yeah, if this is not a comedy movie, like Sam Neill gets shot to death in the end.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
And then he is vilified and she is lionized as this great hero that saved Ricky Baker.
Which, of course, I mean, that goes into like almost not necessarily incentives, but you know that's how it would play out, right? Like everyone involved kind of knows that. So in a way, it sort of like makes that more likely, you know, like how this is going to be viewed from the outside is I'm the good guy and he's the bad guy.
Yeah. Now, Pat, what do you think from your legal expertise? I mean, obviously you're not an expert in New Zealand law or whatever, but you know, you can use your general principles of understanding. I mean, he's a 13-year-old kid. The law doesn't give him any kind of standing in terms of agency, right? There has to be some sort of custodian.
Yeah, I think he would have to have a guardian. I haven't done a lot of, you know, like child welfare law or anything like that, but I could almost guarantee you that she has governmental immunity in her position. But I mean, to your point about, or your question as to, well, is she really off base here? I think the answer really is, and Daniel, you kind of hinted on this. It is incentives. I mean, her incentive is not to find the best home for him. Maybe that is on paper, but her real incentive is to make a problem go away. And making that problem go away is putting him in a home that's going to stick, not necessarily putting him in a home where he's going to be fulfilled in like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of way. You know what I mean? So that incentive, you know, our department receives funding, you know, the better we perform, the more problems we make go away. Therefore, you know, I can power trip if I strong arm this child and put him in a situation where, you know, make him do things that he doesn't want to do because it gets me off in some kind of a, you know, power seeking kind of way. So I think that's kind of where it goes to. But again, if she puts him in a situation where he ends up getting raped, yeah, there was a famous case in Wisconsin about this. I think where there was a case where a child was in a foster, like a temporary home, and there were many indications that the foster father was abusive, and the foster father ends up like terribly injuring the child. And it was determined that there was governmental immunity for this, even though like I don't think it's called CPS, but CPS had all these warning signs. So absolutely, yeah, that's part of the problem that's wrong with the system is this immunity, but also those perverse incentives.
Yeah, it sure seems like they have like a qualified immunity like the police have. Like they can make a mistake, they can put a kid into a home where they're going to be assaulted, or they should know, or they end up getting assaulted some way or another. They should bear some kind of responsibility for forcibly putting that kid in there, but yet they don't. What were you going to say, Daniel?
Well, I'm sort of reminded, and this is not, you know, about adoptions or anything, but just anytime you have government sort of involved in regulating and verifying the safety of something. On paper, yeah, it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like, well, if we didn't have these regulations and these, food inspectors and building regulations and building inspectors, then we would have poisonous food and shoddy structures. Well, recent events in Florida, it turns out that there were many warning signs, and every time it got brought up, it was brushed aside by government, by the very people who are supposed to be implementing these regulations and ensuring the safety of these residents. And we'll put Spike Cohen had a really good articulation of the events over the years that kind of led to it, and it's like failure after failure after failure of the system intended to make it safe. And because it was monopolized, there was no competing method of ensuring its safety. Also, the residents there, because they are aware of these regulations and building inspectors and all of these things, well, of course, if it's not safe, we'd know about it. So the consumers, the residents, are led to believe that something's being taken care of that is not being taken care of. And we see this all the time. All the time. If you knew as a consumer that it's on you to verify the safety or the whatever of anything that you're about to consume or live in or drive or whatever, you would look to, trusted third-party sources that were, perhaps in a free market, a truly free market. You'd have, Yelp and TripAdvisor and whatever, but equivalent, but multitudes of them. And so you would have a really good check and balance system, a true check and balance system, not one entity branching itself to ensure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing and that it's allowed to do what it's doing, and then ruling that it's allowed to do what it's doing. The virtuous circle of government checks and balances. So it's a long-winded way of saying that whenever you have a monopolized system, you get poor service, you get high prices, you get shoddy workmanship or service, and then you also end up leading people to believe that something is being taken care of when in fact it is not being taken care of. You could also apply this to charity and welfare, things like that. A lot of people will assume that their tax money is going towards the needy, and so, that's already being taken care of. I don't need to donate more money, even though in the United States, I think it's the highest per capita donation rate, even despite all these taxes and social welfare programs that exist. Granted, the flip side of that is there are also tax incentives. They'll steal a little bit less money from you if you've already given some of it to charity. So, a meandering way to sort of make several points there. Did I answer any of your questions?
Excellent, Daniel. There's a video on YouTube by the great Larkin Rose, and it's called The Great Escalators, and it's about cops. And one thing that struck me in this movie, and I know it's a comedy, like you could do the same thing about the Blues Brothers and the massive amount of cops that chase after the Blues Brothers. But one thing that struck me in this movie was the escalating chase of like these massive SWAT teams that are chasing after these guys in the woods.
Oh, and like how much resources were being
how
thrown
much
at
resources are being thrown at it, and guys with assault guns like chasing after people, and people that have exhibited zero threat, right? They're just running away from you. They're not exhibiting any danger threat to you. So it's typical government response where they're like, well, throw SWAT teams at them instead of like one person who's like a negotiator or somebody, like some kind of mediator person that would just want to talk. Now, there is a scene where Ricky Baker is discovered by the CPS lady and her incompetent cop friend. And she discovers that Ricky Baker's like, I don't want to go with you. What are you talking about? And she's like, yes, come with us. Come with us. And he's like, no, I don't want to.
Oh, and throw your guy under the bus. Tell us that he did something bad to you, even if he didn't.
Sure, absolutely. Now, if you're trying to steelman her argument and say that, that she's really a heroic character, you could argue that Ricky Baker is abused and he is defending his abuser.
Yeah, Stockholm.
Because, right, very much Stockholm syndrome, where he is defending his abuser because to admit that he's being abused causes more pain. So, but that's from her perspective. She is basically playing armchair psychologist to Ricky Baker, describing that's what's happening in this situation. And she's only using her own biases to only pick out information that supports that theory, as opposed to listening to him objectively and him saying, no, I really don't want to go with you. And then using that as going, well, maybe he really doesn't want to go with us. Maybe he's found something that's better than what we can provide. There's just this, when you have this single monopolistic God figure that answers to nobody, right? In this movie, she really doesn't seem to answer to anybody. If anything, when she gets at the end of the movie, she's like a hero and she keeps her job, I'm sure. Maybe gets a promotion. There's nothing that she does seems to go badly for her. All that expenditure of resources has to get explained away as, look how wonderful we are. And if we had more money, we could have found him faster. So you taxpayers need to pony up a little bit more money next time. But yeah, it seems like, and it struck me because there's all kinds of CPS people today, and I don't know exactly how CPS offices work. I don't know the ins and outs, but I'm sure there are people whose job it is to decide who goes where and decides what's best for people they've maybe spoken to, maybe for a few hours tops. Like, you meet with a kid, you read his file, you talk to him for a few minutes, maybe a few hours if you're lucky. And then you, with the power of God, decide where this kid's going to spend the next, 5-10 years of his life. And it just strikes me as a very much, right, like, this is the worst possible way we could do things. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Do you think that foster parents should be paid, like, for taking in a kid?
Because they are now, right?
Yeah. Like, is that another perverse incentive that creates a situation where, you're encouraging parents, who can profit off of having foster kids?
It seems to be a perverse incentive.
I mean, I've heard stories.
Same with kind of like the welfare mom queen, having all kinds of babies and getting paid a whole bunch of money.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that if you're going to foster a kid, you should pay. Like, I mean, you should pay yourself for all the expenses that entails to ensure that, your motives are pure or altruistic, at least.
Right. As opposed to, well, we could make X amount of money if we take on another kid. So let's take on a couple more kids.
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't want to disparage all foster parents, and I would also say that there certainly is a need sometimes for kids to be not in a situation that they're in.
Of course. Yep.
Rachel Kennerly, she was on for Instant Family, and she's been a foster mom and went through an adoption process, I believe. And during that discussion, and it's a little bit fuzzy, but I think that one of the points that was brought up was that it's really, really difficult to get approved for adoption. And so that's the other end of this sort of problem, right? You've got all these kids who are in bad situations or don't have parents, or they're orphaned or whatever. But on the flip side, you've got it to be a very difficult, long, and expensive process to be able to adopt. And it seems as if those two things don't really match up all that well. And so you sort of have a bottleneck that's going to cause a lot of these problems.
Indeed. So why is it easier to become some sort of a registered foster family than it is to become an adoptive family?
I would imagine it is. It's more of like a temporary thing until they find a longer term home. I'm sure there is a vetting process, but we've all seen the news stories over the years where, there's been abuse in foster cares or whatever. But you could also argue that, someone going through an adoption process unvetted or without some kind of like stake in it, could be, some fucked up person who just wants to get a kid to, do bad shit to. I don't know. So it's almost like you want there to be some kind of like vetting system and vetting process. And most people's gut reaction is, well, the government, figure it out.
The worst institution. Let's have those guys do it.
I remember back, when we were on your basketball court solving the world's problems, it was all about, well, what could the government do to solve this or to solve that? Or how could they improve whatever system's in place to do it, and that's bureaucratic creep.
Yep. Once you start having them do one thing, it's a small little step to have them do another thing, and then another, and then another, and pretty much they got their finger in every single pie.
From my understanding, the way that it works, at least like in Wisconsin, is that you apply to be a foster parent, and you have to go through a certain amount of training. And after you go through that training, you're qualified to accept foster children that they rank on a scale of like neediness. So if you have a child who is like ultra violent and disturbed, they're like a category 5. And you have foster parents that are qualified through category, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or something like. Actually, 5 is to be institutionalized. But that's the system that exists here that I understand.
Yeah, so they do, at least they're like try to categorize and better fit, like, okay, they need this level of, training to accommodate a kid that has this type of needs. I mean, at least they're making that effort. And
yeah,
I guess
the problem is that when they give a kid who's clearly a category 4 to a family that's only registered through category 2, and the reason being is that we have no other family that can handle this kid.
So do they just then categorize the kid a 2?
Yeah,
to make it work on paper?
I'll just say that I've dealt with a call on a case like this before, where that was the situation.
Okay. All right. Well, if we could shift a little bit to the dynamic in the relationship that kind of stems from this, because the Sam Neill character and Bella, the wife, they're trying to adopt him, or are they foster?
I thought they were foster.
Yeah, it seemed.
I thought that they were just next of kin, and that they were getting him because he had nobody else or whatever, and they had just been found.
Oh, yeah, that's fuzzy to me. I don't know if they're related at all, or if they were sort of foster and into adoption. It seemed like Bella was very much wanting to build rapport and relationship with Ricky. Like, oh, you can call me auntie, but I don't think that meant that she truly was the aunt, or that Heck was the uncle.
Yeah, just like a term of endearment.
Right. And I also really enjoyed her sort of hands-off approach, like letting Ricky kind of make his decisions. Like, oh, okay, are you going to run away? All right, just make sure that you, get a big breakfast.
Yeah, can you run away after breakfast, please? Sweet.
Well, I don't give my kids that much leash, but maybe I should,
That's what really made me think of this place where they around here where they take kids, troubled kids whose parents are like multimillionaires, and the parents have no time of day for them. So they're like these urban East West Coast kids, and they plunk them up and they take them into like north central Wisconsin, and they go off into the middle of the woods with these like undergraduate psych students who are also from the East and West Coast, and they're all like fresh out of undergrad, hippie, like crunchy hippie types. And it's so funny that they're out here because, like, if you know this area of Wisconsin I live in, it's like Bush Light and pick 'em up trucks, and in farmland and stuff. So it's just so funny. And kids run away. They come out with the helicopters with the infrared cameras.
Oh wow.
And they hunt them down.
So that's the question I have for you guys. Like, at what point? I mean, I guess the government couldn't call off the search because they're committed. Like, this is we're the heroes, and we're out getting the kids, and we're gonna take them home, and it became too big of a story, right? But imagine it hadn't been a big story, and it's at what point do you just go? Do you is it just a waste of resources, right? I mean, the whole movie is one giant waste of resources, because what happens at the end is they get taken in by the cops, they have a little hearing, and then they just get released. I mean, Sam Neill spends some time in some kind of a posh prison type home thing, and then he gets released, and then Ricky Baker's like, well, I want to live with you. And he's like, oh, okay. I mean, they're just reunited at the end. So it's all pretty much for nothing. There's no like big change. So it was all one big giant waste of resources. I mean, should none of that ever been spent? Should some of it have been spent? Should all of it? What say you, Daniel? I mean, obviously you're not a statist as much as, I mean, you're more of a statist than I am, but I don't think you would advocate for so much use of resources in this endeavor, or is it enough? Like, as a libertarian, I mean, you pretend to be a libertarian sometimes, so you could understand that, you're coming to the defense of another if you believe that he's really being aggressed against, right? And that he's a hostage, and you're totally justified in expending all the resources that you care to expend to rescue him, right?
Well, I mean, it's a tough question. It's based on who knows what and when and from what perspective that they have on it. I mean, when she comes upon the burnt down building with the effigy, the dummy inside, it looks like foul play may have occurred. And she's got, paperwork on Heck that said that he's killed a man before, has been in prison before. His wife just died. And there's some thoughts that he might be unstable. And then the first report you get is from these hunters who report that the kid's been molested, because, the funny scene where the kid doesn't realize what he's saying, and the hunters hear it one way and the kid meaning it another way. So, I mean, from that perspective, yeah, it looks like you're coming to the aid of somebody who needs help. And it's really only after she encounters Ricky in the woods and does her pop psychology, she makes the determination then and there that Ricky might have Stockholm syndrome and doesn't want to turn in on his abuser, like you were saying. So I can kind of go pretty far along with her thinking she's doing the right thing and expending the resources to save the kid. I mean, but of course it turns out we, the omniscient viewers, know that the kid's in no danger and that it's all a misunderstanding. And that really the threat is posed by them trying to help.
But what if there wasn't that, even if there wasn't that hunter scene in the hunting lodge where he's a molester or whatever, there was already a wanted poster on the wall of that place, offering a reward and whatever for them being turned in. So they were already hunted before the whole molester charge came. Like, this is a kid that has supposedly been delivered into the Sam Neill's care, and now, isn't showing up for his check-ins or whatever, the house calls, make sure the kid's getting along good with the family, and the family's
well, they had sent that letter saying that they were going to retrieve him. So
right.
In their mind, they're ending the stay there or whatever.
Right. So the Sam Neill and Ricky Baker have broken contact, and they are justified in seeking out contact. Do you think that the SWAT teams are necessary? I mean, these are people that they are armed. They are obviously they need to be armed to be able to hunt, to survive in the woods. where in your statist brain does the lady take a step too far? Because in my mind, she is the villain in this movie. I understand in her brain, she's the hero, but I think she is unjustly aggressing against these two people. And yes, you're right. As the omniscient viewer, we know all the information. She's only subject to part of it. But I think even if she was able to watch the whole movie, she would still say, no, this kid still needs to come in. We still need to bring this kid in and deliver him and put him through the system and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I'll grant you that. I think that she would do that because that's her job, right? And that's, she's got to do it by the book or whatever her rules and regulations dictate. Now, is there a point where she crosses the line from from the omniscient viewer's perspective? Or the other way around?
Yeah. From your perspective, does she ever cross a line?
I think when she tries to negotiate with him and get Ricky to turn on Heck and claim that he was molested by him, because it seemed as though she kind of knew that wasn't accurate. It's fuzzy, but I think there was an exchange where maybe she was aware that it wasn't true or was a misunderstanding, and she's still pushing him to do it so that she could then come out with the accolades, right?
Okay. So you're okay with the SWAT teams. I knew it. Okay. What about you, Pat? What do you think?
Well, the SWAT teams were after the molestation accusation, right?
They were still, the hunters were chasing them through the woods. She was chasing them through the woods. I think there were some other police type people also chasing him in the woods.
Okay. Yeah, it was at the fire, right? The fire of the shed or the garage or the barn, where the cop that's with her who doesn't even have a gun.
Right. She goes, we need to get the cops. And he's like, I'm a cop. And they're like, yeah, you're right. Not a cop.
Yeah, we need the ones with the guns.
We need the real cops.
Okay,
right.
And that's before the molestation.
Before the molestation. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So she finds this barn burned down with this obviously fake kid in it, and she calls out the SWAT teams.
Yeah, that's a bit far. Yeah. So I think there might be you can make up the bulletin of, hey, we're looking for this kid and last known with this guy, sort of like a, have you seen them? We want to make sure everyone's okay, that kind of a thing. So maybe a search party and some publicity, but beyond that,
sure.
Yeah, a bit much.
Yeah. What did you think about the hunters in this movie? Obviously they're just guys out hunting. They're kind of played off as like dopes, but they seem to be well-meaning, right? I had a sympathetic feel for them.
They turned into bounty hunters.
They were the bounty hunters working for the state, trying to get money from the state.
Were they bounty hunters to begin with?
No, they were just hunters that they happened upon at that hunting cabin. And they saw the wanted poster or whatever. And yeah, they probably viewed themselves as a hero, but they also seemed like jackasses to me, right when we saw them on screen. Like they weren't there to reason with anyone.
Right, or they weren't too interested in the finding out the truth.
Right, right. Because they saw the wanted poster, they knew all they needed to know.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So they read the headline. Yeah. All too common.
Yeah, it is.
So going back though to Robert's question about when the lady crosses the line, I think it was when she placed a foster child in a home with someone convicted of manslaughter.
Oh, interesting, Patrick. So you don't agree with them putting him into that home at all?
I don't. I mean, you're going to put a child in a home with strangers, and I don't know if they had been vetted as foster parents, but he's convicted of manslaughter. He got into a bar fight where he killed someone, right? That's what happened, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but when we're presented with Ricky Baker, he'd been with many fosters and has this litany of things that he does that are bad.
Right.
So he's like worn out his welcome.
I knew you were a statist, Daniel.
This is like last resort, though. Like this is her last, the last house she's willing to place him in.
Well, then, okay, the other thing that happens, though, the intervening factor is that the lady in the house dies, and he's alone with the convicted manslaughterer.
Mm-hmm. And that's when they want to extract him.
Yes, but why didn't they do so immediately?
Well, it takes time, the bureaucratic process. They send a letter.
And their argument was that there's no longer a woman in the house, not that now you're alone with a manslaughter.
And to be fair, I mean, manslaughter is not, it's not as bad as like murder one, but yeah.
Well, what's this sexism that there's not a woman in the house, so this guy obviously can't take care of this kid now?
Right.
What's up with that?
Yeah, I guess they weren't woke enough yet.
It's not very progressive. It's not very progressive.
That's right. Not very progressive.
Yeah.
Is there a statute or a principle in law that something kids need to be placed with men and women or two parents or whatever?
It's an unspoken rule. Is the best interest of the child means that they go with mom. Especially younger children.
So he should have been killed and put next to her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Organs harvested.
Nice.
And sold to
waste not, want not.
Chinese diplomats or Chinese oligarchs.
I like it.
Don't get us banned, all right? Okay, so I can see...
Are you censoring me, bro?
I can see... He's zucking you.
It's a private company.
I'm zucking you, bro.
Podcast.
I can see the argument that they would make that a two-parent home would have better outcomes because you'd have a provider and a caretaker, or people in position to be so.
But he's retired, right? I mean, they're both retired.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, they're oldsters, so they also seem to be almost like homesteader, live off the land types.
Yeah, they go out and catch dinner.
Yeah, which I got to tell you, it looked pretty appealing to me. Granted, it would be a hard life, but man, if you just had like 50,000 acres out your back door of bush country and you're like on the edge of it and
high-speed internet.
And how badass is she when they're out just like to see a pig and they're just like, oh, let's go get some dinner. And then she just like whips out the knife and jumps on it.
See, that's the director. That's what I was talking about with these. Like Jojo Rabbit was like that with the grenade scene at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That was a good movie too, Jojo Rabbit. Did you do that yet?
No,
we have not.
We've seen it though, right? I watched it, and I think
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's good. It's fun. There was another thing I wanted to bring up, just about living where they lived and just how idyllic that is. Not only is it a hard life, but it seems like even out there, they're not left alone.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sad.
Yeah, no, they're in New Zealand, which is like a super totalitarian kind of a state. They recently had the COVID lockdowns that they were not letting anybody almost do anything.
And then their PM was on TV doing an announcement like, any news you get needs to come from us. Otherwise, it's not true.
And then they've also been very much anti-gun lockdowning with they had that big mass shooting a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, living out here, man, the only time I ever see any kind of government bureaucrat person, you see them maybe as you see a sheriff driving by. That's about it. Every like couple weeks, maybe. And that's if you're driving into town. But yeah, maybe New Zealand's just more of a controlled place. But they have massive rural areas. So yeah, that is disheartening. It's too bad.
I think what we're going to see, as a brief aside, is more like federalization of police forces. So it's like, I'd rather be oppressed by the local sheriff than be oppressed by like the Capitol Police. You know what I mean?
I mean, you can move to another county a lot easier than another country.
Yeah.
And I think your local sheriff's more likely to talk to you, whereas some kind of Fed person comes in, they really don't want to hear about what you want to talk about.
If the local sheriffs like refuse to enforce unconstitutional laws, like, you know, Second Amendment regulations, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's some good sheriffs around here that were saying some positive things about Second Amendment and the mask lockdowns and that kind of thing. That was nice to hear.
Yeah, hopefully they stick to their guns. But on that, I got to say some corny shit every episode. So, any other points anyone wants to bring up before we get into final summary and review? Because I feel like there's more to talk about, but we are running low on time.
Well, I just wanted to know. I mean, Taika Waititi is become very, very famous comedic type director guy, and I think his style of humor is quite funny. I wondered
his
if
cameo was great.
Yeah, his cameo was fantastic as the pastor guy. But just I wanted to know if you guys thought this was funny. Like, is this comedies are fewer and farther between since probably like 2010. I mean, since this whole woke crap kind of pretty much killed the comedies.
Yeah, it's hard to be funny without being offensive to somebody.
Right. Like I want to say like the Hangover movies were the last like kind of, you know, edgy comedy.
Yeah.
I can't remember a movie in the last decade that was like edgy comedy.
Yeah, it seemed to be like they were all trying to one up each other and push the envelope further and further into like who could top who in gross out humor or offensiveness for a while there.
And then they disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was funny. I laughed out loud a couple times. I lolled.
Me too. Daniel, where were you at? Where you at, buddy?
I found it funny, though not like hilarious. Like it was a safe funny. You know, you could tell that they were trying to be safe other than when they were sort of ribbing at Christianity or whatever, because that's fair game.
Yeah, right. What about the conspiracy theorist guy?
Oh, I dug him, actually. He was actually a very sympathetic character.
The Ted Kaczynski guy.
Yeah.
Really. Psycho Sam, right? That's his name?
Yeah. Well, that's fair game to make fun of conspiracy theorists too, right?
Yeah.
I was personally offended.
A little too close to home?
A little too close to home.
It's like, I got one of those suits, damn it.
Yeah, that the tin, it wasn't a tinfoil hat, it was more like a spaghetti colander hat. That's me.
Yeah, I knew it. And the jetpack.
You know, there was the dog situation, which I understand why it's there. You want that emotional content there, but man, it was kind of hard to see that happen. You know, with the
dog being killed by the pig.
Yeah, by the giant boar, who was about to kill Sam Neill, and then Ricky saved him with a shot between the eyes.
Calm, cool, and collected.
We should probably talk about like the fact that Sam Neill's character can abduct a child and lead police on like a 2-month-long manhunt, and then he gets a year of jail time, and then there's no like restraining order after the fact. Like he's not on probation that forbids him to contact the child that he abducted. Let's
talk about that, Pat. How much did that throw off your reality sensors?
I don't know. I mean, so the United States is known for having very heavy-handed punishments, but in places like Scandinavia, I mean, you can murder someone and be in like basically a Huber program where you live in like communal living and have like a nice house and you can like cook your own meals and stuff. So
like what we're all in occasionally lately.
Well, yes. Be human cattle on the human farm.
Yeah. That stuck out to me a little bit because one would think like if he had a day in court and they were truly able to explain like I didn't actually abduct him, there was no molestation, why would he have gone to prison or even for the year?
It's possible the jury could have been sympathetic. Some jury nullification going on there.
Maybe.
Maybe the judge, they do what's called a PSI here, pre-sentence investigation. So the jury will convict guilty or not guilty, and then the judge decides the sentencing. And there's a huge like PSI that's done with like psych evals and like the sentencing guidelines, and then the judge, maybe all things considered, was like, this is not a bad guy.
Well, it sounds to me, Pat, like you're trying to make Sam Neill have some sort of an obligation, and I'm not necessarily unsympathetic to this argument.
Yeah.
So having some sort of obligation to be the adult in the room and to say, no, Ricky Baker, we are going in, we are going to stop this harassment. Obviously these cops, we're not going to have them waste all this time and resources to chase after us. We're just going to be like, we're going to present ourselves, turn ourselves in, be like,
explain
what's going on and do what you will. And then it's going to all be over. Obviously, then you're not going to have a movie, but It sounds to me like you're saying that he's got some sort of an obligation to be the adult in the room. Is that where you're at?
I mean, okay, at least in the eyes of like the court, I would think their argument would be like, okay, well, your ward ran away in the middle of the night. You chased after him, and in finding him, you broke your ankle and you were stranded in the wilderness. And then, you would have an obligation in the eyes of the court to be like, take him back right away as soon as you're able to, or at least flag someone down or something like that. In order to, do no criminal wrongdoing and abscond with a child.
Oh, so you actually put him as being an immoral actor at that point.
I don't know if I do. I think the court would.
Okay.
But then again, what kind of agency does a child really have? I mean, I think they should have some agency, but at the same time, like, I don't think that I kind of take the view that, a child's guardian is a trustee of that child's rights. So, a trustee could do several different things that would be determined to be like a reasonably prudent thing to do. So it's kind of a subjective test. A reasonably prudent guardian could be like, well, the best interest of this child is not to go back into foster care. Or a reasonably prudent guardian could be like, well, I got to take the kid back to go back to foster care. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough call. Where are you at on this one, Daniel? Do you think Sam Neill has some sort of obligation to turn Ricky in at some point before it gets out of hand, before anybody gets hurt?
Well, they find themselves sort of almost in a catch-22 situation due to misunderstandings, right? So they almost like are forced to go on the run, because even if they were to turn themselves in, it was already like alleged that something bad had occurred and they wouldn't be believed. And then you had the ratcheting up of the molestation allegation being added on top of that. I'm a little bit fuzzy on exactly when Heck's character decides, okay, well, we might as well just keep running at this point. There's a whole bunch of bush here because we can't go back, because they are not going to understand how we've come to this situation. Like, no one's going to believe it.
Okay, so you're not putting him as an immoral actor at any point in this movie, then?
No, I felt like he had to make a conscious decision, but that his hands were tied.
Okay. Here I may be the naive one of the three of us, or just the utopian one. I don't know, whatever the word is.
The only real anarchist.
The only true anarchists. You guys are a bunch of status assholes. But I attributed much more agency to Ricky Baker, even though he was didn't know a damn thing about a damn thing. Like, he was incapable of taking care of himself. But he had the sense to listen to his uncle, and he had the sense to stick by his uncle and to learn from his uncle. And the Ricky Baker at the end of the movie is a much more capable human being than at the beginning of the movie. Good character growth, good arc, excellent. So I still, even at the beginning of the movie, I wanted to attribute a whole lot more agency to him, even at 13, than, I mean, obviously when he's running away at the beginning of the movie, I wouldn't advise that as an adult. I would be like, no, that's not a good idea. But when you have this experienced bushman and by your side teaching you how to live, I'm like, isn't this might be the best situation for this kid. He's actually found somebody that is willing to spend real good bonding, father-son time.
Yeah.
Even though they're not father-son.
It's a microcosm of that program near Pat.
Indeed. It's just not state sanctioned.
Mm-hmm.
But Pat's a statist, and so are you. So I understand.
All right. Well, Robert, why don't you get into final summary and review? Because it sounded like you could have teed one off there.
I could have. Okay. So, man, Hunt for the Wilderpeople. I remember watching this movie not right when it came out, but I want to say maybe a year later or something like that. And having a real positive experience watching it. And then when Dan asked me if I wanted to do a movie, that's the movie that sprang to mind. And I'm glad I did, because it was fun to watch it again a second time. And it was still as funny because I had forgotten a lot of the jokes. Are you hungry? Of course you are. Look at you. I mean, that's funny shit. But I loved all the different themes that came from it. It obviously, anytime you have a man versus state movie, you're going to tickle my libertarian feels, and I am going to be rooting for the protagonists, the underdogs, even though they realistically, deep down the entire movie, they knew it was only going to end one way. And in fact, they're incredibly lucky that they were in a comedy. Otherwise, at least one of them is going to be winding up dead. Because when man goes up against the state, almost every single time, man loses, because the individual is the ultimate underdog, which is why I'm a huge champion and fan of the individual and rooting for. I love underdogs. Everybody loves an underdog story, and this is a big time underdog story. It's also a buddy movie. It's an odd couple movie. It's a fish out of water story, and it's a funny comedy
and coming of age.
There you go. That too. It's a kid growing into an adult. I mean, he's obviously, it only takes place over a few months or whatever, but he learns a lot and grows a lot in that time. And even though he's still Ricky Baker at the end. But I also enjoyed that there's an undercurrent in the culture of people rooting for Ricky Baker and the Sam Neill character of, they're becoming famous and rooting on their kind of outlaw run. Like the girl with the horse and the father who was just like super stoked to get pictures with him and
get a selfie,
getting a selfie and loving hosting him. And like, these are stories that they're going to tell their friends and their family for years. Like, Ricky Baker slept on my couch. They're super stoked to be rooting for the person that is fighting against the state, even though they're not necessarily fighting against the state. They're just running away and trying to live their own lives. But the state in this movie takes the place of, and I hate to say this, but they're like the kind of the overwatchers. They're like the parents in the room. They're making sure that everybody's okay and doing things properly or whatever. And I think that they do a terrible job. And I think that, we've gone over this a million times, but they just muck things up so badly. Anytime that they act like they're the parents in the room, the adults in the room when they're dealing with adults. Anyway, I can understand from the perspective of Pat and Daniel why you would need or desire some kind of societal oversight, so that because this could be another story entirely, right? This could be a story where a kid is abducted by a molester guy and takes him off, drags him off into the woods and does horrible things to him. And this is a horror movie or some other thing. There's any number of interpretations or movies that could be done off this concept. So I understand it from that perspective. It's not just a pure libertarian fantasy man versus state type thing. But anyway, it's a lot of fun. It's just this perfect melding of things for me. Even though I generally don't like comedies, it's a comedy with strong libertarian themes in it. So I enjoyed talking about it. I'm going to give this movie an 8.2 out of 10. 8.2. What was that bird they were trying to catch? Or maybe
go wild boars, maybe
8.2 wild boars out of 10. Sure.
Or selfies. Do selfies? Because he did take a lot of selfies.
That's true. That is true.
8.2 haikus out of 10.
Oh, yeah, the haikus.
Yeah. I should have prepared. Co-host long lost Robert has returned to do an episode with us again. There you go. Haiku.
Wow.
Oh wow. That was good on the fly.
Fucking deep, bro. All right, let's get yours. How many wild boars from you and final summary and review, Pat?
Okay, I think I'll start with the final summary and review. Lots of really good films coming out of New Zealand. I particularly enjoy them. The Auntie was in another New Zealand film that I really enjoyed called Housebound, which was a very fun and tasteful like horror comedy film. So go check that one out if you haven't checked that one out. Also, like Peter Jackson, Dead Alive is a cult classic horror film that I love. But this was a really good one. I really did enjoy this. All the other films that he's done, especially What We Do in the Shadows, I've really enjoyed. But not all of them have had kind of the libertarian themes to it that of this one. I enjoyed, like, I was going to call it a whimsical coming of age tale. But it you know, what's that movie with the two? It's kind of like a feminist film with the two women.
Thelma and Louise?
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of that one a little bit.
The ending is very much the same.
Yeah, and I was waiting for that, you know.
They're going to jump off the cliff, yeah.
It was a comedy, so I knew it wasn't going to end that way. But yeah, definitely would watch this one again. I'd give it an 8. I'd give it an 8 haikus out of 10.
All right, 8 haikus, 8.2 wild boars. I got to come up with something else. Rare birds, but I don't remember the name of the bird. They're supposed to be extinct. But in general, I found that this movie was very well done, very quirky. I really enjoy the directing style and the cameo by Waititi. It does have a lot of good libertarian themes, as Robert pointed out. I didn't really see them as much until you started discussing them, so I actually learned something tonight, which is a good thing. Overall, it's pretty fun, and it does give a lot to consider and think about. It also makes me want to like live more in the wilderness and kind of live off the land in the bush and be hunting wild boars and just pouncing on them with a knife and having dinner. It sounds kind of awesome. But overall, it's a well done film. It's quirky and fun, and cinematography is pretty interesting. It's a beautiful landscape. I also like that Ricky Baker, he developed that connection with what's her name, Bella, to the point to where when he decided to leave, he took her with he took her remains with him to go and find where the land or the lake meets the sky or whatever, where she said that she's from and where she would return when she dies again. So there was kind of that nice element to it, like that bond had developed and flourished, and he had found a home and wanted to be in that situation. So overall, it's a good recommendation. So I will give you some kudos. It sort of makes up for you missing last week's episode on Half Baked, which actually, now that we have you and you did watch that movie, and I'm sure you prepared slightly for it. Do you have an elevator pitch? What was your elevator pitch on Half Baked?
Like recommending that movie?
Yeah, like what's the gist of your take that we missed last week?
Okay, so Dave Chappelle is pretty funny. I enjoyed when he was playing the rapper guy. It was a better movie than I expected. It actually had a plot that kind of made sense. But I mean, it was a stoner movie that was of its time. I was almost relieved that I didn't intentionally miss the show, but I was almost relieved that I didn't have to talk about it because I didn't have a whole lot to say about it. I don't even know what you guys ended up talking about or how you reviewed it, but I'd probably say it was something like a 5. It has to be funny. If it's gonna hang its hat on being funny, you have to make me laugh. And it didn't. And Pat is massaging his majestic man beard there. I could do the same thing, sir.
Yeah, we got three beards nice going on.
I like it.
I'm just playing with my camera.
I like it. What did you end up giving it, Daniel? Like 7 joints out of 10 or something?
Oh, something like that. Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
It's funny, and if you're in for kind of a stoner comedy with some Chappelle, there's a lot of like Chappelle-isms in that he recycled into his show a little bit.
Is it better or worse than Up in Smoke?
I haven't seen that.
Oh,
Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke. I would say better, but only because I didn't grow up during Up in Smoke. That was old hat by the time I was around.
What about Dazed and Confused? Is it better than that?
We did do that movie, didn't we?
We did that movie. That's less of a stoner movie.
Better than Pineapple Express?
I mean, there's such different movies. Well, actually, Pineapple Express is kind of similar. Like they have a business of selling weed, and that's the same thing in Half Baked. Except Half Baked is more straight comedy, and Pineapple Express actually kind of has some. I mean, even though there's plot elements, but the plot elements aren't taken very seriously in Half Baked. Like everything is played up for comedic value. Like they need to get their friend out of prison because he's gonna get raped by what's his name, dude. But it's played off as a joke that he's gonna get raped by what's his name, dude.
Yeah,
like there's a whole dropping the soap scene. It's played up for comedic value. I mean, out of context, sounds kind of offensive, but whatever.
Hey,
but yeah, if you can watch it, you should. You'd like it.
Tommy Chong was in it, so
yeah, he was the Squirrel Master. Is that right?
Nice.
Yeah, he was the one who protected Harlan Williams' character in prison, but then
he protected Harlan's butthole.
Yeah, but then he got released, and so then Harlan was going to be on his own. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for your take, Robert. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. I did. Yeah, I don't want to let a viewing go to waste, so I'm glad you asked for my opinion on Half Baked.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask.
All it did was reaffirm my opinions of straight comedies. Sorry, they're just not good fodder.
Okay, we're going to change it up a little bit for next week. I'm going to want your opinion again. I may not heed it or listen to it all that much, but I will record it and present it as content for our listeners. Right. And that is going to be Point Break, the Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze version from the early 90s.
Yeah,
with our buddy Johnny Profita of the Peddling Fiction podcast. He was on for Desperado for Cinco de Mayo. And we're going to do this surf movie.
Is he still in Mexico?
Movie. He is, yeah. Yeah, he's loving it down there. And,
is he still hanging out with more nude babes?
We'll have to ask him. That'll be some pre-show bonus content. We'll ask him all about that. Maybe in the KTO as well, which we're going to do a little bit of Kathleen Turner Overdrive after this. Available for our Patreon supporters. Go to lastnighters.com/Patreon for that. And we're also going to be posting a couple of things about where you can save some money. There's like this Rakuten shopping app that I shared with Pat a little while ago. He spent some money on it, saved $30 and a couple of % on whatever he bought. and then we got $30 in exchange out of their out of this service for promoting them. So that's kind of cool. So we'll put that link out there, and we'll even put Pat's link out there, and we'll have dueling links on the show notes page, so you can pick Pat's link or our link, and either way, you'll save money, and one of us will get rewarded. Whose kung fu will be faster and stronger? We'll find out.
LibertyWeekly.net/cashback.
That's
well,
right.
Since you guys are all just plugging ads and crap, I did see your boy Pat Flynn. I saw a video of his on the tubes yesterday where he was peddling that app that you edit by Word document.
Oh,
you
yeah,
edit audio and video. It looked amazing.
Yeah.
Like if it works really well, that is incredible for people that make YouTube videos or podcasts and you want to edit things out. There's even a I mean, you pay for it, but there's an extra app that can remove the ums and the ahs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's amazing technology.
We could definitely use that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little pricey, but
it is. It was like $12 a month or $24 a month for their premium edition. But if you are in the business, like if you're like a YouTuber that actually makes money and you make those kind of that kind of content where you want to like edit your videos really easily and change out the, jump cut things around, that just looked like a game changer to me.
Yeah.
If that was my world, I would totally do that. I was tempted to buy it, even though I don't do that stuff. It looks so cool.
Okay. Well, maybe we can work out a deal where, I could probably use it as well. And I think that there's a way to get multiple license seats, and the more seats you get, the cheaper it is. So maybe we could get a little consortium going.
I could use that.
If anybody actually does it, yeah, that would be cool. Because I'm tempted to get it just to play around with it. It looks so badass if it actually works as advertised.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can look into it, and we'll also try to get an affiliate link for it, put it on the show notes page at lastnators.com/187.
What is it called? Descript?
Descript. Yep. Descript. D's nuts. Descript. And
Descript.
This is the end of the show. So we got see you guys all next week for Point Break with Johnny Profita of the Peddling Fiction podcast. You can find show notes more for this at lastnators.com/187. You can find Pat's work at the Libertarian and also at libertyweekly.net. Anything else you want to plug at the very end here, Pat, before we get into the bonus content for people who pay us money?
Well, if you want to pay me money, go to libertyweekly.net/support. Thanks, guys.
All right, fair enough. And with that, we'll say goodnight from last night, everyone. Peace out.